Hello, and this is another update on the war in Ukraine. First up, we go to Russia, where they have done another test launch of a hypersonic missile. This missile traveled approximately 1,000 kilometers, hitting its target. My knowledge has only been 2 hypersonic missiles used in the war in Ukraine at this time. Okay, moving over to Europe, where there has been an extreme case of Russophobia sweeping across the continent. However, on the other hand, there has been great praise of Ukrainian culture. In the United States, where Nazism and white supremacy is considered a hate crime, while the liberal media and Democratic Party have condoned this behavior in Ukraine, praising them as freedom fighters. Moving over to Latvia, where there is a monument to the fallen soldiers that liberated the Latvian country. Several people were taken away for protesting the demolition of the once famous monument. And there has been a scheduled demolition by the parliament, and it's now considered a crime to protest the demolition. And in Europe, we have a wave of criminal activity being committed by Ukrainians and Ukrainian gangs. This scene, you're seeing Ukrainians attacking a taxi driver. Apparently, he said something they didn't like. And in another incident, Ukrainians have found someone in the street that said something they didn't like, and he is beaten to a pulp. Other places of Europe, Ukrainians have been outlawed from entering stores because of theft. And moving over to Ukraine, where we have Ukrainian soldiers that found someone that they didn't like and were promptly executed. And moving over to Azovstal, where approximately 50 Ukrainian militants surrendered as they were discovered hiding within the complex. There is yet many secrets to be discovered about Azovstal, and there are still numerous militants hiding within the complex. Keep in mind, we still have not encountered the NATO commanders as of this time. In time, they will be revealed. And some bad news for mercenaries captured by the Russians. These 3 were captured in the DPR, and they were being informed by the authorities that they do not fall under the Geneva Conventions, as they are not considered Ukrainian combatants. They were warned prior to entering Ukraine, and now they face the death penalty. This could escalate international tensions. And in the United States, President Biden, in his typical reckless escalatory fashion, approved long-range rockets and MLRS systems to be shipped off to Ukraine. This was clearly a crossover of the Russian Red Line. However, one of the main challenges for the United States, which is yet to be overcome, is how do you bring in all these weapons into Ukraine? Keep in mind that the Russians have eyes on the ground and air superiority, making it very easy for them to locate and track most, if not all, the arms, especially the large arms, entering Ukraine. And the situation on the Eastern Front continues to worsen for the Ukrainian military as the Cauldron continues to turn into encirclement, and the entire Cauldron is under intense artillery fire day and night. Numerous units of the Ukrainian army are refusing to fight, and numerous units are surrendering, taking the risk of being executed by their comrades. The area that is most dire for the Ukrainians is in the city of Severodonetsk, which has been taken mostly by the Russians, and the Ukrainians are in the outskirts, completely encircled and cut off from any supply. The Russians have been intensifying their artillery in this region. It consists of mortars, rockets, large caliber artillery, tanks, mines, attack helicopters, aviation strikes, and missiles. It is having a devastating effect on the Ukrainian morale. In the words of one Ukrainian soldier, I can't even stick my head up. One of the large problems for the Ukrainian troops, and one reason why a lot of units are refusing to fight, is that they don't have the weaponry to counter the Russians, especially with the artillery. The artillery strikes are devastating. It prevents the movement of Ukrainian troops. And now with decreased mobility, the Ukrainians face the probability of being completely cut off and encircled, and it's not just in this region, but in many other locations within the Cauldron. They are faced with the unthinkable of needing to surrender. The Russians are sending in leaflets through their artillery and even ingenious ideas of using drones to deliver these messages to surrender to the Ukrainian troops. The TOS system, as depicted here in this video, is one of the most heavy and demoralizing weapons that are being unleashed upon the Ukrainian troops. This flamethrower TOS system unleashes a barrage of fire and explosions on a target. In this particular target that you see, this was hit by a Russian missile, and you can see the effects. Quite devastating. Keep in mind that there's approximately 400 to 500 individual artillery strikes every day and night. The Russians used their general artillery on the combat positions. That's more the mortars and large caliber artillery and the rockets, while the large missiles are used for more like the logistics targets, command and control, further off strategic targets, and weapons depots and fuel depots. So this is how they use their artillery. Various missiles were also used early on to take out air defenses. At this point, there's very little air defense left on the Ukrainian side, and the Russian aviation, including their attack helicopters and attack aircraft, are able to pretty much hit targets at will. They still fly in at low level because they're avoiding the infantry style weapons such as Stinger missiles. In this set of photos, we have the results of the Australian Bushmaster armored cars that they had given Ukraine as part of their aid, and the Russians just basically want to show what happened to those Bushmaster armored cars, and I don't think the results are very pleasing to the Australian government. The Russians call these trophies, whether they're going to use them or not. I wonder if these Americans and British mercenaries are particularly worried about the others that got captured and are being charged with the death penalty, considering that these mercenaries are now encircled and trapped within Severodonetsk. Seems like they're having one of their final good meals, as I believe this hotel has been taken over. President Zelensky, after him and his colleague cursed out Kissinger for the reality of needing to concede territories He and his friends over to the State Department, who were behind the coup attempt, will need to contend with the fact that before their eyes that these Ukrainian territories are being transformed into Russian territories, as the Russian flag is being hoisted upon administration building after administration building. These territories are now holding referendums to decide, let the people decide whether they want to stay within Ukraine or become part of Russia or a separatist region of their own. This is the transformation of Ukraine to Russian parts of Ukraine. And this is happening everywhere. As you can see, in Mariupol region, in Kherson region, and in many areas that are not even part of the DPR and LPR are now deciding their fate. And in some regions, they're using the Russian ruble. They're opening up offices where they're allowing people to become Russian citizens and even offering Russian SIM cards for their telephones. In this interesting video, the Russians explaining that this was a strategy map used by the Ukrainian commanders. It had the demarcations of all the units that they found of the Russians, and they were tracking them, as well as keeping track of the Ukrainian units and their positions. And interestingly, they left and they did not even think about trying to destroy this map, which it probably is irrelevant at this point, as the Ukrainian troops have all fled and or have retreated. Remarked that the local cats seem to really enjoy the Ukrainian commander's extra large sandbox. At this point in the conflict, there is very little remaining heavy weapons within the Ukraine military in the Donbass area. The Russians have high morale and they are attacking more aggressively. After months of relentless missile and artillery attacks on the Ukrainian positions, it softened these positions to an extent that it's making forward progress much more rapid for the Russians. They are achieving their targets. On a daily basis, you will hear of several settlements that have been taken over by the Russians and their allies. A settlement is more or less like a rural village or like a farming community. You're also going to find that in recent weeks there have been a very large amount of surrendering being taken place on the Ukrainian lines. Now keep in mind, for surrendering, the Ukrainians take a great risk, because I mentioned in many of my videos that the chances of getting executed are quite high. And of a particular unit, for example, there was 20 that tried to surrender, 16 were executed, and only 4 managed to survive to actually surrender to the Russians. In this series of photos, you'll find some captured weapons, including an old 50 caliber, looks like an American Browning 50 caliber machine gun, including several of the more modern weapons, the NLAWs, and you'll see a Starlink communications device, courtesy Elon Musk. In this particular city that was liberated, the people in the city had claimed that the Ukrainians, when they were fleeing the city, decided that they would try to destroy as much as they could of it. And they rode down the tanks through the city streets and shot at as much buildings as they could. They also planted mines. One thing they like to do is put mines in doorways, and they also fired from a further location. They fired the multiple launch rocket systems into the city, and they also fired white phosphorus to set fires to as much buildings as they could. They demonstrate, this reporter demonstrates the white phosphorus projectile, and there's numerous testimony from the city inhabitants.
Как медицинскую, так и в плане продовольствия.
Попасно украинские националисты, отступая, пытаются добить уцелевшие дома и мирных жителей, которые вынуждены жить в подвалах. Умерших и погибших приходится хоронить во дворах и огородах возле своего жилья.
3 недели в подвале лежала, уже ничего не ела, только воду пила.
In this video segment, you see a UAV guiding artillery. The UAV has become a critical battlefield component, and along with artillery has a devastating effect, as you can see, the complete destruction of a Ukrainian stronghold. Reporters explaining that this helicopter is the largest helicopter in the Russian fleet. It carries 80 paratroopers fully equipped. It's used extensively for cargo and carrying personnel. It's armed and also has some aerial defenses. It's one of the most important helicopters.
192 тепловые ловушки. Именно они защищают Ми-8 от выстрелов из переносных зенитно-ракетных комплексов. Сначала ракеты видят вот эти камеры и датчики, они передают сигнал и выстреливаются тепловые ловушки.
Только что экипаж этого Ми-8 получил боевое задание, и у нас есть уникальная возможность увидеть его выполнение прямо с борта вертолета. Вертолет летит на предельно низкой высоте, это всего 5-10 метров. Чтобы противнику было сложнее нас обнаружить, ну а для бойцов лучше просматривалась местность.